Hello everyone. It's a Sunday morning, though this is the first video you probably will be watching, where I am using screen capture on this interesting open source software called the OBS. It is actually the second video I do with it, but what I'd like briefly to explain to you is why you get code, right? What usually happens when I give you MATLAB code is that some of you love it, some of you hate it. It doesn't really matter. Code and numerical analysis is extremely useful. If you hate programming, this might be a good time to stop doing so and start loving it. There won't be code on your finals, but in the middle of an online semester due to the COVID-19 lockdown, I don't really know if we can call it a lockdown anymore, due to the COVID-19 restrictions, right? It could come out very useful for you to have this available because some of the teaching experiments I usually do using tennis balls, I throw around rulers, I shoot nerf guns, I have springs that's vibrating. I can't really do that now, but I can give you a bunch of codes visualizing what a motion would look like in order to practice the relation between a differential equation, a physical system, and a motion response plotted, right? So I have here opened this Kraken code, this little monster pet of mine, and I'll now try to run a model here called intro, where I throw around a ruler and a tennis ball, right? This is an example of a particle, this is an example of a rigid body. This rod or roller has a mass that's spatially distributed, meaning that when analyzing this, we have to account for this. This is a rigid body in 2D. This, on the other hand, can simply be described as a particle. All kinematic and kinetic properties, position, velocity, acceleration, along with mass and force, are all centered in one single point, right? So that's a small example of these two types of bodies we will be dealing with. We'll be starting out with particles and move on to rigid bodies. In the very first video on kinematics, we'll be doing a little bit of ballistics, throwing a ball around to figure out which initial angle I have to apply for the ball to make it furthest. And as we can see here, I have thrown 5 balls with different initial angles, and we can see that which one do you think is going to make it the furthest? I think this one, right? But I've also done this before. This is basically just a small numerical test, a virtual test of, this is interesting. Yes, it will be the 45-degree case. We'll see that mathematically later. But this is basically a small virtual test demonstrating the validity of the calculated result. We can have this code do many things for us, but it's still work in progress, right? This is not done, and there's a bunch of things that are not implemented, and there are even things here which are wrong, right? So this is not done. I could do a double pendulum here, right? Which is the simplest example of chaos in dynamics I can think of, because the center of gravity of the lower rod here is never going to return to the same curve again. There's no repeated pattern. This is chaotic. We can tell here that this starts to tear apart after a while. It's called constraint violation because a stabilizer for this has not yet been implemented. As that's a small fault. Here's a larger fault where I tried to do a crank rocker, a 4-bar mechanism with the appropriate joint equations. This integrates a little bit longer. It rolls. Come on, yes. Right, and here you can see that I have a crank rocker with a torque acting, and it starts pretty well, and then it does this, right, which definitely has nothing to do with physics. It should not be doing this, meaning that we have a problem somewhere in the formulation of the pen joints. There's a bunch of students working on that, straightening out the mess I made. So this code is not done, but it's still a lot of fun. And one of the very first examples of an oscillating system we're going to do is here, right? It's a pendulum, a simple point pendulum, also called the mathematical pendulum. So we can do a lot of interesting stuff using this code. You can download it from my homepage. On the other hand, there's a bunch of codes in the lecture notes you can just run directly that have nothing to do with the Kraken. These are not added to make life difficult for you. They're added so you actually can see the motion now that we don't have lectures. But that was just an attempt to do a small and brief justification of why I've been such a terrible person and given you code. It's actually because I think you need it.